Hello, today we're going to talk about space collection for disk drives. By default, MainView SRM will collect space for all storage groups in all SRM defined pools based on pool definitions and your SMS construct information that's in your SMS environment. We send out one default policy, so policies will collect the space information. If you do not define policies, or a volume is not defined to a policy, then no space information will be created for that particular logical volume. So let's start with how it's done out of the box. In the ParmLab members, the system member has a default policy defined for it. So we go find that. It's called BMC DFLT1. And this is it. So the default policies. So if we scroll down a little bit, it's for the group, but in the SM pool member, there are some default definitions that allow for the default policy to collect space information for non-SMS volumes. So let's go look at that. So we go back to our ParmLab members and we look at pools and we look at our SM pool 00 member. You'll see that there's some definitions in here, but this is the one. So by default, this allows SRM to collect space information for all logical disk volumes. By default, this would normally be BMC DFL T1. And that's how it would do. Non-demo is set up so that we don't collect volumes if we don't want to. So the pool name for vol SEER is 1, 3. So it does substitution and it creates a SRM defined pool based on the first 3 characters of the vol SEER. And there have to be non-SMS, and they could not have been accounted for somewhere in a previous definition. All right. So we have some definitions that I've set up here where I've created some additional policies. So you'll see that the policy equals and then your policy name. So I have different policies, and the policies determine how often you're going to collect the data. So let's cancel out of this and let's actually go look at a policy. So we back out of this and we go look at our policy members right here under policy. And we see that the SMPOL00 member is our policy. We'll edit this member. This member cannot be edited from ISPF 3.4. It can only be edited and updated and manipulated within the SRM panels. And you'll see that there's several policies that are defined here. This is the policy configuration view. Policies have at least one interval, most likely 2 or more intervals. There's an interval to collect pool information, so this is your volume and pool information, and they have an interval that collects dataset information. This dataset BS information from a log standpoint is going to determine if you want to collect datasets in addition to your DFHS and BCDS information. You do not have to code this. As long as you've got a data set, this will collect all the data sets for the volumes associated with that policy. This tells you that you will collect any logical volume space information based on the volumes defined to that policy. So as we noted, we'll go back to our pool definitions. Okay, so you can, by default, the BMC DFLT1 policy collects all logical volumes at a rate of 1 hour every hour. It starts at 10 minutes after 8 a.m. and the dataset information is collected once a day, also at 10 minutes after 8 a.m. We'll go through one of those definitions here momentarily. But you can define when you want storage groups. So if you don't want that hourly interval, you can define and set up, say, set store group equals the store group name and assign a separate policy. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a couple of pools and volumes, and we're going to define a policy for them. So we're going to take the test and IVP volumes and define them to a pool. So let's go and look at our group config. So group config actually lists every SRM defined pool and every storage group. So let's look for IVP. We're going to do an IVP pool first. And there's 2 volumes in here. All right, so we'll select those 2 volumes. And those 2 volumes are DMA US 1 and 2. Okay. And then we're going to do a locate on test. Test is a storage group. There's actually 3 volumes in this. So we put our cursor on the 3 under the volumes heading, and we can get those 3 volumes. So it's DAT 100, 101, and 102. So we'll save that. So now let's go back to our ParmLab members and go back to our pools definition. Let's update this. All right. Now I already have test set as a storage group. So I'm going to remove this from the test from BMC default 1 because I don't want it in there. And then we need to find out if I've got those IVPs, and they're defined to an IVP pool. So we're actually going to change this and make this a pool name. We're going to call it test, and we're going to assign a policy called test, and we're going to add those other 2 volumes. And we can mask these if we want to. DAT 100, comma DAT 101, comma DAT 102. We'll actually spell them out in case we've got some other masking criteria. So now we've saved that, we've created that. Now we have to go create our test policy. So go back to the policy, and we'll go edit this, and then we need to create a new policy called test. So we're just going to put our cursor on system. It's pretty much already set up for 2 intervals. So we're going to put that, and we're going to do create new policy, and we're going to call it test because that was the policy that we created or we assigned those volumes to. Test is created. Okay, so there's our new policy right there. You'll see that there's only 1 interval defined, and it's for the pool collection. So we're going to put our cursor on the test, and we're going to update the policy intervals. So we only have 1. We're going to copy this interval, and we use the same policy names for the second interval. Okay, so now we have 2 intervals. Let's go back. There's our 2 intervals. Both of them are set for pools. We want 1 for pool, 1 for test, or 1 for data set. So we're going to update the interval. It's what we call an MPD dialog. We have pool and volume space checked to start with. So we're going to leave this as pools just for the volume information. We're going to make sure we collect this on the system that our data collector is running on, so our SGD subcomponent. And we're not going to collect it every 60 minutes. We're going to collect this twice a day. It's not a very volatile pool. It's not a whole lot of activity. So we're going to set it for twice a day, 720 minutes. And to help with the overhead in terms of the data collection for a pool, we're going to do a full scan never. If it's always, we're going to collect all the data set information, which we will do from the data set collector. So there's not much reason to do an always for this. The view does not necessarily depend upon that data. We're still going to calculate the percent full, the amount of space allocated and used and free, and other criteria in terms of fragmentation, DSCBs, other stuff like that. But we're not going to calculate all the data set information itself. All right. So we'll save this. So that's been updated. And then we're going to go and update the next interval. So we're going to do an update interval, and we're going to make this data set space. We don't have HSM backing up these particular volumes because they're test. We don't worry about that. So we're not gonna worry about collecting the BCDS information for these data sets. Okay. So let's just scroll down. We're gonna do search the VVDS first, and we're gonna give it BMCA, and it's gonna be logging. There is no automation. Yep, I think we do want, no, we're not going to do the applications, at least not here. The time, we're going to start this time to start. So this will be a time where it will kick off. We'll say 0600 every morning, every day, and it's data set information, so we're only going to do it once a day. And because it's data set information, it always has to be an always for the full scan. We're going to save this. So if we hit enter, we see that all of our information has been updated. We see we have a pool collection and a data set collection for this policy. The pool is twice a day. The data set is once a day. We'll leave this at midnight, so it'll be midnight, 12 noon. All right. There's other information out here to the right in terms of start date, end date. We will collect it every day of the week. So we end out. So we go back to our members. Now, we have made updates into multiple members, our policy member and our pools member. We must do a refresh to get all of these changes into storage. And the best way to do that is to go back to our system. The system member is the highest member in the hierarchy. And if you refresh this member, then all members within the UVB PARM for SRM will be updated, and the areas of storage will be updated. So we're going to do a con all. This makes sure that we get both systems because we keep them in sync. And then we do a refresh on each one. So when we do a refresh on each one, we should get a successful refresh as long as we didn't make any errors in our typing, and we did. Refresh successfully completed. Remember, SMM sys00 type system. So all of that has been updated, and now we have a new policy called test that will run and collect test information, and it's pulled out of the others. Thank you.